Welcome to Season 4 of the K4 Business Podcast.
So, question of the audience. How do you show up as a podcast guest in a way that actually builds your credibility and brings you clients instead of just being another forgettable interview? In this episode, our guest breaks down how to become a high-value, memorable podcast guest who delivers powerful conversations, respects the host and audience, and turns each appearance into real business growth. Our guest today is Noemi Beres from Podcast Connections. She is the co-founder of Podcast Connections, a podcast booking agency that helps entrepreneurs and business owners amplify their message by getting them featured on quality podcast shows. With a background in online marketing dating back to 2007, she combines deep industry experience with a master's degree in Danish literature and language, making her a skilled linguist, content creator, and master organizer. Noemi is passionate about using interviews to help experts share their knowledge, build meaningful connections, and grow their businesses. When she isn't matching guests with perfect podcasts, you'll likely find her creating her hand-sewn canvas collages or playing the hang or frame drum or out enjoying a good walk. Noemi, absolute pleasure having you here today. Beaming smile. If you can't see it, you're missing out.
My favorite quote, like all-time favorite quote, is always just keep going. I mean, that's what it is. And that's how I live by in the past 20, 30 years, I guess. So, and thank you so much for inviting me today. It's an absolute pleasure.
I want to know more about the hang drum. Sorry, I'm curious. What's that drum that's just hanging around?
You can call it a hang or a hand drum. It's a beautiful piece of instrument. It looks like a UFO. It has a beautiful sound. I would suggest if you can just Google it or find it on YouTube, because it has a very soothing and relaxing voice. People use it for meditation and for all kind of purpose, but it's beautiful. So it's very relaxing. So Google it, YouTube, find it on YouTube. It's beautiful.
It matches your voice, by the way. Sorry, that's just an aside. Wayne, I'm going to let it go over to you now before I get in trouble.
You're already in trouble, Bernie. I'm going to make a guess. I'm guessing that this guesting company came out of finding guests for your podcast. Is that correct?
No, actually, it's not. I have to say. No, we had an online travel-related business from 2007 up to 2020. And we were into online marketing, social media marketing, but pandemic happened in 2020. So our business basically stopped from one day to another. And we had to pivot. And that was our pivot. We found another marketing strategy to help people. And that was podcast marketing, basically podcast guesting. Yeah.
So a master's in Danish literature and language. Wow. Oh, do you know about Vikings, or is it just language?
Yeah. No.
How does that spin into what you do today?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, it's Vikings, runes, everything back to Old Norse history, Old Norse language. It's very deep into the Scandinavian history and literature. And yeah, it's very interesting because obviously everything goes back to communication when it comes to business. And I think that really helps. And also when you speak different languages, as I'm a linguist, like I speak Danish, Swedish, Spanish, I learned German, French at school. I also learn Greek and Irish right now. So it really helps your brain to keep your brain basically fresh and creative. And I think that really helps, like kind of my brain when it comes to business and being creative in business as an entrepreneur.
My understanding is your partner is actually in a different country. Have I got that right?
No, the partner is here because the partner is my husband. And so he's still here in Cyprus. So we run the business together.
Got it now.
He's on a ship. He's cruising the neighborhood, the Vikings.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, basically, I can see the Mediterranean Sea here, and there are some cruise ships sometimes.
So it's you that's in the other country compared to a Danish literature specialist, not your husband. I got it now.
Yeah.
Your guests. What's the first thing that surprised you about with guests for podcasts? Like we went through training, both Wayne and I, to understand how to put together a podcast. We went through training, and all of a sudden, there's kind of a rhythm was mapped out for us. What did you find out in the rhythm of getting guests for podcasts? What were the things that surprised you?
It's kind of you're in the background and you organize everything for them. You provide them with a done for you service. So it's basically you're always in the background. But once once you become a guest, you are in the spotlight. You have to show up as a guest, like a proper guest. So it's really interesting from switched from one to another. I started just in the background. No podcast guesting in the first year of business because obviously I didn't have energy and time for that. Plus, I need to learn how to be a great guest because I had no clue about it. I didn't really listen to podcasts before 2020. So it was brand new for me. And when I learned it, like how to be a great guest, I worked with some amazing clients who were absolutely, fantastic guests. I learned a lot from them and I watched a lot of interviews. And then it really helped me to also become a better guest and to start to doing podcast guesting myself.
What were the mistakes you saw early in the game that you realized you had to correct of the guests that you were bringing to the podcast?
Always has to align with the show. It's just so important because it needs to match. So in order to know that, you need to listen to those interviews, listen to those episodes and podcasts, and figure out like who is the right match for this podcast. And also energy wise, it's really interesting because when you have a podcast host who is like high energy, but when you have a podcast guest who is he's very introvert, you really have to be careful how to mix and match them because it can cause some trouble along the way.
I remember interviewing one gentleman for this podcast. I'm looking at him and going, "Are you okay?" He says, "Yeah." So like, "Are you tired?" I said, "Yeah." So if we're doing it, if you're come as a guest, you have to have a little more energy because no
A
one's going to
little bit.
listen. No one's going to listen to you. 5 minutes in, either they were asleep or they found a new channel. Yes. Why do people underestimate the power of a podcast and being a guest on a podcast?
I think one of the main reason is that it's really hard to measure ROI when it comes to podcast guesting. It's almost impossible to see. It's like, and so many people think so. Okay, if I appear on 10 podcasts, then I got like hundreds of clients. If I'm a coach, or if I'm offering my service, or if I'm selling books, or if I want to promote my book, everybody wants to buy my book, but it doesn't work like that. So it's really important to know this is part of your marketing strategy and don't just rely on just podcast guesting as everything else. Like there are other parts of a marketing strategy that you can use. Yes, you can run Google ads, you can, run Facebook, Instagram ads. You can do everything else. This is just one leg of the table. I always, use that metaphor. I think that's important because don't think that like 2 podcast interviews will make you a huge entrepreneur or will bring you hundreds of clients from one night to another, because that's not going to happen. So yeah, we have to be super clear about that.
And that
Have you
still
ever-
makes me sad. I thought 2 would do it. I thought I'd already be rich and famous.
I know.
Have you ever found someone go viral? And I get what you're saying. Listen, it's steady as she goes. I get that piece, consistency and presence.
Yeah.
But have you ever had a moment where someone's gone viral all of a sudden, the right verbiage at the right time in the right context, and it's like lighting a match. Next thing you know, you should be on TikTok. You ever had that moment transpire?
I've seen that with my clients too. Like many podcast hosts share the interviews or clips, audio clips or video clips on, for example, on YouTube, like shorts, YouTube shorts. And I saw that like some of them got like thousands of views and everything. So and comments as well. And that's big. I mean, it can go viral. So obviously that's possible. And also there are several podcasts. They have a huge YouTube follower numbers, and when they promote these shows on YouTube, you can see them. They some of them go viral. Not every show and not every interview, but many of them, for sure.
Tell me about this dating scene where you're you're finding these 2 people, the blind date. How do you do getting the right guess? Yes,
Oh,
is inadequate.
we almost changed the show. Knack is a different type of knack, and not for business. Oh, wow.
For a moment, I stopped this. It is like a dating. I mean, you're absolutely right, Wayne. I mean, it is like a dating game. Like you definitely need the 2 parties there, like, and you need to figure out like who is a great match. But in order to do that, you really need to get to know your client, the guest, Because if you don't do that, you just you're just in blindness and you're trying to find a podcast that fits. So once we have a strategy call with our clients, once they sign up, we dive deep into their bios, into their lives, into their story, their topics, talking points, everything. We must know everything about them that is related to podcast guesting or about their business, about their ideal clients. So it's a deep dive into their life and stories. It's really important. Other than that, like, you won't find the right match for them, as same as in dating. Yeah.
Kiss and tell or spin the bottle. A whole different game. I got to remember that now for my next podcast guest. Totally different. So when you're doing podcast guesting, is it? I'm going to presume it's mostly remote connections. Do you also do it for in-person interviews and panels?
Yes, yeah, panels, definitely. Sometimes summits, also radio shows, live radio shows. I've been in a few radio shows as well, just like my clients, and in-person interviews as well, because they're becoming more and more popular right now in the US. So if someone lives in the neighborhood or in, not too far from that specific studio, yes, we can organize that too. Absolutely.
You ever find that sometimes you see this in the news here in Canada and in the States? Some event transpires. Doesn't matter what there's a flying cow or a flying pig, and someone goes, "Tell us about the flight patterns of the bovines or swine." And someone comes on as a subject matter expert. Do you ever find that you will match someone going, "This person is really an expert, and this person is looking for a soundbite about whatever the topic is," and you kind of pair them up for a news story? Do you ever find that happening for you, or is that a potential?
It is a potential. It's always a potential. I mean, matching these people and finding and sharing their stories, I think it's incredible. And the more vulnerable and the more open the guest is, these stories and these interviews and conversations just becoming just better. And I really enjoy that part. I think that's where the magic happens, when people open up and really share things about themselves and not like hiding behind a mask or something, and they just don't want to share deeper, things from their lives.
One thing that I'm interested by is, in order to know who you're plugging in where, you have to listen to a lot of podcasts. When that becomes part of your job, does it become a slog?
A little bit, a little bit. It can be, yeah. So, but you listen to a lot of podcast interviews, but thanks to AI, now we don't have to listen to that many interviews because the script is there basically, and so you can run a script and you can get a summary of the podcast. So yeah, this is like kind of behind the scenes secret. We can't listen to all of the interviews. So we need AI sometimes to just do the summary and figure out like what we need from the specific interview, because it's a lot. It's too much, even for our teams. We can't listen to podcasts 24/7. So yeah, thank you, AI. We can do that now.
What? You don't listen to all the content?
We can't
Just us,
Wait.
right? Just Knack for Business.
be here today. I'm just listening to podcasts.
No, no kidding. No kidding. Someone goes and says, "Listen, I want to be a guest." And you go, "Sure." And I found you a perfect match. What are their next steps then to make sure that it goes well for them? It's like you've done some matches with me. I'm talking to the person, and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh yeah," and then all of a sudden, which surprised me. Well, I've listened to a couple of podcasts, or listened to excerpts of podcasts, or I looked at your website, right? Which is like interesting, cool, and props them. What do you expect? I may have given part of the answer already in this question, but what else? What else should they be doing?
Getting ready for a podcast, being prepared. I think that's key. And it's not just like I'm listening to that interview, but they must listen to at least one episode. And I always specify that. I'm very specific about that with my clients. Like, when we start working together, please listen to an episode, because then you will have a better knowledge of the podcast, of the host vibe. I think that's really important. And just being present and being there when you actually have that interview, not like tail to tail interviews all the time, because people and listeners, the audience, can really like feel that and hear that when you are kind of burned out of all the podcast interviews you're doing, from tail to tail conversation, you're rushing from one to another. And so you're tired, you're not present, and I think that's important. And it's kind of disrespectful to the host too if you are not present and you're just like there because, okay, I must do this because I must sell my book. So being present, being prepared, I think they are key. And also I always try to tell them to not to create a monologue for the podcast host, because this is a free flow conversation, like kind of a ping pong. So you always need to be careful with your timing. And I was on podcast when the host was just talking too much, and I was on shows when, vice versa. So I listened to shows where the guest was like doing a monologue for 20 minutes. And that's just not right. So you need to keep the balance between the host and the guest, and you need to be aware of the length of your story. You can talk about like from your birth up till now, and it need to be in shorter version. So it's need to be condensed a little bit.
Mom and Dad had a twinkle in their eye, started the story. Yeah. Wrong one. And the music in the background was.
So it's interesting. Our industry seems to be evolving. It was originally on your computer or then on your iPhone, and now video is playing a role. Can you tell me about that and what you see video changing and how you're doing it under those new rules?
Yeah, it's a really interesting change, because I remember when we started in 2020, I had to even ask the host, like, do you record a video? Like, and I had to specify to my clients as well. It's like, oh, they record a video. And now it's like that's the basic, that like people always record a video, and it's very rare that they just record audio version. So actually, I think it evolved during the past 5 years. I mean, since I've been, doing this podcast booking agency. And it's really interesting because it became more interactive. People can see you, not just hear you. And I think it's fun. But what I still know and what I still noticed, that people still listen to the interviews mostly because they listen to them when they're on the go, or when they cook, or when they're in the gym, or whatever they're doing. And most of them still listening to them, not watching them. So it's very interesting. It's still the audio version, I think, rules, but people watch them too, of course, and it more and more of them.
You mentioned something that I was curious about. You said, listen, don't go on for like 20 minutes. And I totally get it. We've had a couple guests that did that, and one of them, it was fine. Literally, just, it was entertaining regardless. We like to put the air brake in there every once in a while, going, please explain this part. We might understand it, but the audience might not understand a component of it. But when you're getting ready for a podcast, how do you prep so that do you do like a practice podcast ahead of time, or is this somebody who does Toastmasters, or do you how do you structure it, or do you do a test run with them going, hi?
Yes, I mean, the answer is yes. Sometimes if someone is starting out and they really need help with just getting into the vibe of podcast guesting. How do they sound? And what do they say to the host? Sometimes we do a test run, like a mock interview. I used to do that with a couple of clients. Most of our clients, actually, they were on podcasts before, so they have a clear idea what to do and how to do it. But I can always give them advice, of course, how to, just how to be more efficient and how to be a more outstanding guest, I guess. And I think that's important. But yeah, we can definitely do a test run if it's needed. And when it was needed, we did it. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What do you do when the guest's confidence comes off as arrogance and you're absolutely dreading the phone call from the host? I'm sure it's happened.
Yes, it did. Yeah. A couple of times. And I had a very, well, like, I tried to just host more relaxed during the conversation. Obviously, you validate their feelings because there was something going on, and that the vibe just wasn't there, or it happened that the guest was kind of deciding, I don't want to do the pre-call. And the host was a bit like upset about it, because this is my show. I'm doing pre-calls, like my show, my rules. So why can't they just stick to it? So yeah, it happened a few times. And like as an agent, like, as a PR agent, you're always there and you try to smooth out things between them and make it a better experience for both parties. And sometimes it happened that even after the interview, there were some very strange feedback from the host about the guest, or a strange feedback on the other side. It happens, obviously. It's part of the business. But we always there and try to make everyone happy.
It seems as a host and guest, The iPhone changed the rules, and not always for the better, may I add. But where you used to have video cameras and green screens, and now all of it's just what's your take on smartphone podcast guesting?
Sometimes, yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because sometimes the smartphone's camera, like iPhone's camera, is better than anything else. So it's pretty cool to use it. And I'm still planning to do that, but I'm still using my MacBook Air's camera for the recording. So it's there. But I guess, everything, like the tech stuff changes and evolves like from month to month. And they always come up with new ideas. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of like strange backgrounds or whatever, and I think it's a good thing that something is clear, something is nice, and I love simplicity. So let's not just make everything so complicated with the tech stuff and everything. If the quality is there, if the sound quality is there, if the camera's quality is there, I think it's good to go. And I read a report about this or a study about this. It's really interesting that if you have guests and they have a good external mic, they sound more intelligent. So people tend to listen more to those guests on the show. It's very interesting. The sound quality, that actually still rules. It's really important to have a good sound quality because people will stop listening your show if it's not there.
Well, I think doing the pre-interview though, one of the reasons I like doing the pre-interview is just to get a sense
Yeah.
of the guests coming in, and also at the same time you're getting a sense of sound quality and image quality. I mean, primarily we're audio, but I like you observed, we were recording in video, and we'll post it on YouTube also. So I'll play it at both ends. So to me, that's a really a good toe in the water, dipping the toe in the water component. And by the way, your guests, your connections with us have been outstanding. So just I just to give you
Thank you.
kudos back, right? So like I haven't gone. What was Naomi thinking here? Like, oh my gosh, stubbed my toe a couple times. When a guest comes on, what two or three questions should they be able to answer off the cuff? Because a lot of times, like we'll have a script, right? And we before we ramp up the conversation, I say, listen, we have some points to cover, but we'll flow, and there might be a rabbit hole or two that either Wayne or I will find. But what prep should a person have, even though they don't, if there is no script or there is a script, but they might be having to be prepared to answer.
Yeah, I think one of the two important questions, like how did you start your business and why? The how and the why. I think it's really important. And what your business, or what are you about? Because if you can't answer those questions, you basically can't talk about your business, and that's really important. Because sometimes people, like, they are entrepreneurs or they're coaches, and they can't really tell you in 3 sentences or 2 sentences what they're actually doing. So they can talk about it like for hours, but you really need to be concise about, like, okay, and laser focused, like prepare like at least 2 3 sentences. This is what I'm doing, and this is why I'm doing it, and how I serve people. To answer these questions, I think it's really important. And you also help the audience understand, like, what you're doing actually, because you need to be super clear about, because people can even misunderstand you, or hiccups can happen. So
I have found interesting, you talk about alignment. Now, we have this strange connection where there's two hosts, and it usually works. One thing, when Bernie finds a guest that he knows the background and maybe the specs and whatever, I have to make sure I'm not the the handheld marionette. What have you ever seen where the host and the guest almost couldn't speak the same language? And I'm not mean I mean, yeah. What do you do to make sure there's something that connects?
to find the right show for the right guest, I think that's really important. That they must align. Otherwise, I won't send them from that specific client to that show, because that wouldn't work. So thankfully, I didn't really see those hiccups in really my work, because when we really match them well, that's not going to happen. So I think that's a good thing. But it's really interesting, like what you said about, like, for example, having two hosts on the show, and how do you deal with that? Because that's a different energy here, and you always, like, you have to keep an eye on both of you, and answer different questions and stuff like that. And actually, I was a co-host for a podcast for a while, and it was interesting. I was always the one who prepared and everything, and my co-host, he was the one who came up with the deep questions and let's dive in. I'm kind of the more like, very organized type of person. So it's really interesting have these energies around and conversations. And also when you, for example, have panel discussions, when you have even more people on the show. So that's also another interesting setup when you have conversations, not to over talk each other, wait until someone stops. I think that's also important when people record these episodes.
If you technically finding out what guests are there, who makes a podcast is out there. And it could be like a drunk in a dartboard, but you've got a concierge process where you charge money and deliver results, but it's I would call it a premium product. Could you explain why it isn't just opening the phone book?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is like the right match. It's very tailored. We have a boutique company, so we really keep keep an eye on the podcast host and on the guest, and we really help them. And also, I think it's also important in a business to run like in heart-centered way. You really look after your people. You care for them because just not seeing the dollar signs in their eyes or whatever. That like, oh, okay, I can pay my mortgage if I get one more person on the show somewhere, but you really look out for them, care for them. And whenever they have a question and they want to jump on a call or they're concerned about something, you're there to answer those questions because that's how we establish a great relationship with them. And that's how we can keep our clients and customers. I think this is really important. You just care for them as human beings, not dealing them, okay, just a client out of the one and there's the next one. No, you care for every single one of them and they stay with you.
So someone comes up and they say, "Listen, I've never done a podcast before," and I had one tell me, "I haven't done a podcast before," and we just spent about 40 minutes chatting away. And I said, "This could have been the podcast," because it's not structured, but it could have been. How do you get a person to shake the anxiety or the stiffness? And sometimes this might be practice makes perfect. If they've never done a presentation before, there might be a bit of work to do with the person. But how do you get them to go? Just go in there, just be chill, like a leaf in the wind. Just go with the flow, right?
Yeah, basically, that's what I'm trying to tell them. This is just a friendly conversation between one, two, three people, and just enjoy and get ready, be prepared, but enjoy the conversation. That's the fun part. Use your sense of humor. I mean, it's so important. And you don't know how many people will listen to that conversation, but don't care about it. It doesn't really matter as long as you bring value to the audience. And it doesn't matter you are starting out now. Everybody started somewhere, so there's always a first podcast interview for everyone, but just enjoy the process. And if you have a great host, they will help you with that. You can even tell them, like, see, I mean, this is my first interview, so please handle me with gentleness or something. And they will do that because we are all human, so it helps. And I do work with a lot of people who just starting out in podcast guesting. And to be honest with you, Bernie, I love working with them because they are the best clients. They really trust in what you tell them, trust your knowledge, trust your experience. It's magical. And especially I have elderly clients as well. They're starting in their late 60s, 70s even. And they are brilliant. They are flying. And maybe they didn't even do any podcast guesting before. But when you prep them right, when you help them along the way, they will get there. And it's about practice, practice, practice. The first interview is never the best one for anyone. And I remember my first. It was like, oh my gosh, it was a disaster. And actually it was a Canadian host. I mean, he was great. But he had very deep questions for a newbie. So I had to prep myself. And I felt after the interview like, oh my God, it was a lot. I hope all the other interviews will be a little bit easier.
Tell me about etiquette. What do you warn the guest? And were you pretty firm with them? And when have they blown it and brought shame to them and you, if at all?
Yeah, they usually stick to their etiquette. Like, please don't do interviews at an airport or in your car or while you're driving. I mean, or don't leave the dirty laundry in the background. It happened. Like, people saw that before. And I remember, I don't know who was that, but I remember that story that the podcast host stopped the interview. It's like, sorry, can you just remove that stuff? from the background, because it's just not professional. It happens, and people must know that. So when we prep people, we always tell them, okay, so get the camera, not camera, but like have a proper camera, get that microphone, have that ring light. Please don't sit, with your back behind the window, because nobody will see your face. Or try to look out the dogs and the kids out of the room where you're recording the episode. So they are just basic etiquette, and also appearing like kind of appealing to, like, for ladies, yes, we need to wear the makeup and everything. And if you are a podcast host, just wear something, just a guest and a guy, just wear something nicer. Or I'm not, not your button-up shirt or whatever, but just something that it's suitable for the show and just looks nice, because of the video recordings and everything. I think that's etiquette. And also part of the etiquette is be on time when it's a podcast interview. Don't be late, because so many podcasters working so hard to produce these episodes, and they won't wait for you for 10-20 minutes until you appear out of nowhere. And then and it messes up their schedule, it messes up your schedule. So these are, I think, the most important etiquettes you need to stick to when it comes to podcast guesting.
I've been told that the follow-up, thanks for having me on, letter or phone call or Zoom is actually maybe the most important piece. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely, Wayne. I agree 100% with that. It's so important, because I mean, if somebody does something for us, I mean, that's the least we can do to thank them. And especially when a host, like, records the episode, edit the episode, creates promotional material. Even sometimes they create blog posts about you and social media posts and tag you. They do an awful lot for you to just record that one single episode and promote it, to the world and on social media. So that's the least you can do. And I mean, there are like certain different or web pages that you can visit and like send out cards. I know so many people use that, and they send cards when someone was a guest on the show, even from the host to the guest, or from the guest to the host as well. I think that's a brilliant idea. What I do, I usually like send an email, because I'm in Europe, so it usually takes like a month to get something over to the US or Canada. So I do send an email after the show. I thank them. And now I started to I'm an artist. And so I make collages, different type of collages. And with many podcasters that I really enjoy the interview with, I ask for their addresses. So I send them a little gift that I like handmade collage by mail. And I think it's fun, because that's how you basically build a relationship with someone. Because podcast guesting is about building relationships. It's about networking. And once to say thank you, and once you establish a relationship with someone, you can be friends, you can start a business together, or people can hire you. Even the host can hire you for something. And it always starts with a thank you.
One of the other elements after production's done and it's posted, the promotion piece, and you touched on that. The host is pushing out content. What should the guest also be doing? And from the content that gets pushed out, let's say it's on LinkedIn or Facebook, but also there's content, right? Like if you spent 10, 15, 30, 40 minutes chatting, whether it's a visual or soundbite, what should a guest be looking at with all that information?
I mean, at least post it, because I heard these horror stories that they don't even post anything. Like the host literally emails them, all the promotion material, all the clips, all the quotes or whatever, like key takeaways from the podcast, and they do nothing with it. They just like, okay, if they forgot they had an interview or something. So I just don't get that part. So like, yes, please post it. And yes, please tag the host. And yes, do it multiple times, because people's like goldfish. They won't remember what you posted like 2, 3, 4 weeks ago on LinkedIn, on Facebook, or on Instagram. You can totally do that again. You can rotate your posts, and it will appear like, oh my gosh, that person always on podcast. That's so cool. And they don't even realize that maybe that's the same podcast you've been a guest on just once. But content is king, and it's so hard and time consuming to create content. So why not use wisely what you have on your hand? Like a podcast interview, it's so versatile. You can use it in so many different ways on different social media platforms. And it's a beautiful way to get into a different audience too, because once the host tag you, And once you tag the host, you will appear in front of the host followers, for example, on LinkedIn. So people will, you get more followers, they will get in touch with you, and they may be your clients. You don't know. They may buy your book or buy your service. But just do the promotion, because it's so important. And when you promote something on whatever social media your favorite is, just please try to be unique and not just click on that reshare button, or that reshare. Yeah, that's the button on LinkedIn. And that's it. Like no comment, no description, nothing whatsoever, because it's not good for the algorithm. So try to come up with something unique as you repost something. It's so important, because there's so much content there that people won't notice anything that won't stand out. So try to stand out, try to be a little bit unique. And what I also advise people, that even before the interview goes live, you recorded the episode, but the episode is not live yet, please do a teaser. Like I do that with many times with I did with your presentation too, when I was doing that. So like, yeah, come and watch my presentation, or come join this amazing group, the East Trade Winds. And people love that, and I got the likes even in front before my presentation, like 2 weeks before that. So that was so much fun. And why not to do that? Like, teasers. It's marketing. It's all about marketing.
An alchemy questions. Dark science. How do you find out who the audience, or even can you find out who the audience of a podcast is? Is it just what they
That's a
say?
very good question. Yeah. You have your, I don't know, tarot cards or something, and you figure it out. And the crystal ball way, I think that would help. But yeah, to be honest with you, podcast, like, I mean, do you know who your listeners are? Like, you can have an idea, obviously, when they leave a comment on Apple Podcasts, like who those people are. But yeah, it comes back to the podcast. You don't really have those perfect numbers, data about your audience. They can check your social following or whatever, but you can see who follows you, but then you don't even know those are your listeners. So it's kind of a guess game. Yeah, it's like kind of the crystal ball, unfortunately.
Are there any KPIs that you would track from a podcast? Like once, recording happens, it went well, it's produced, out the door it goes. Are there any KPIs you do as a follow-up to see, did it make a small splash, a big splash, any splash at all?
What we do and what we love to do, for example, after pre-call, we always ask the host, like, so how was it? Like, because if there's something didn't go well, I mean, we must know that upfront. After the interview, I usually advise to my clients to get in touch with the host and jump on a post-interview call, because usually when they record the episode, everybody's rushing away and 100 things to do. But when everybody's more relaxed, I always suggest to my clients to jump on a call with the podcast host and figure out whether you can help each other, how you can serve each other. We don't really do that part for them, but it's basically kind of up to them how they use it wisely, that relationship and connection with the host.
I'd love your feedback on, is the guest who has a totally inflated sense of the value of his intellectual product. I'm going, yeah, you had mayonnaise is the secret sauce. Get over it. The world knew. What do you do when they're very close to the point that it actually is temporarily making the interview tough, when there's so few secrets under the sun?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it actually brings back a memory that I had a few conversations with different podcast hosts about it, that they treat it as like their baby, and they don't want to talk about anything else. Is that what you meant, Wayne? Like during a podcast interview, for example? Yeah.
Either side.
Yeah.
I find that they don't know that they are the secret sauce, not the herbs and spices.
Exactly. Yeah, and it shouldn't be about the product, or shouldn't be about the book or the service, but about their story. Like you can definitely sell your book or service, but through a story, because story sells. And the more unique the story, the more aligned your message will be, with the audience. I think that's really important. But I also heard these horror stories, like, when an author loved their book and they just kept, the host asked them, so where can I find more? Can you tell me about this more and that more? And then they said, it's like, no, you can find it on, page 32, page 50 in my book. And that's just not working. That's not how you do podcast guesting. You need to provide value. You need to add value to the show and help the audience.
Almost sounds like you're a little bit of a tease. You just tease enough to go because you can't do the whole book, right?
Right.
Speaking of books and other podcasts, is that good etiquette then to bring up during that time? Do you ask the host and do you bring up, if you can, other podcasts, other books, or even special offers? Like, some people have, here's a freebie, right? And the idea is to get that KPI some traction feedback, right? Is that something that's okay within a podcast space for someone to provide?
Yeah, I mean, as a guest, if you mean like as a guest, yeah, you can totally do that, but the timing is everything. So don't start your story or don't start the conversations like I have a and this is how amazing it is and everybody should read it. Like wait for the host because this is not your platform, you are a guest. So be respectful. So when there is a space and time, they will ask you, so can you please tell me more about your book or tell me more about your service and how can people find you? Or do you have any freebies that you can give away to my audience? Yeah, there's a space and time for that, but don't focus your conversation around that because that's just not right. And wait for the host because that's the host platform.
Two things. One, do you have one train wreck story where something went very wrong technically, or someone said the very wrong thing, or do you have a train wreck story? And if this rings a bell, how do they reach you to become a podcast guest?
Yeah, the train wreck story, it's kind of, I think I can share my story because I was on a show and that was a couple of years ago. And because the podcast host had like a completely different accent than mine, but she wasn't a native speaker and I am not a native speaker. So basically, I couldn't understand a word what she was saying. Like I didn't understand her questions. So what I was doing, I didn't want to sound like I a few times I asked her like just to repeat the sentence, but that I couldn't go on like for 10 more questions. So I was just guessing. So after the interview, I just I felt like awful and like maybe I shouldn't have done this. And yeah, you have to be super clear about like different accents and different questions because it was a disaster. And you asked me how people can find me. That was the second part, right? Yeah. I mean, you can always find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active there. I spend a lot of time there, and I think it's a great way to do business. Just on a side note, and also you can visit our website, which is podcastconnections plural.co, not com. So that's where you can find me.
So, Naomi, and follow up to the previous question, do you have a podcast? Do you have a book? Do you have anything that's out there that you can have people reach out and know more about you?
I do have a podcast, but it has nothing to do with podcast
That's
guesting.
okay. That's okay.
Yeah, it's called the Silent Thinking Podcast. And it's an ASMR style reading podcast. And if you don't know what ASMR is, that's okay. I mean, it basically those stories or books when people read books on podcasts or on YouTube, you can listen to them, you can relax and fall asleep faster, and you just it's very nice. So that's what I'm doing. I'm reading my friends' books. They are authors and I'm reading them books with their permission, of course. And it's a weekly podcast and I really enjoy that. I don't do interviews. You just tune in and listen to my voice. And that's what I do. And I also have another service called the Silent Thinking Sessions where I provide people with a very non-judgmental, positive space where they can think in silence with me. And I'm the silent space holder, silent thinking space holder. Yeah. So that. I also do that.
I want to say thank you so much for being a guest today. It's been entertaining. Now I know a bit more about drums and Scandinavian knowledge and Cyprus. To my co-host, Wayne Pratt, thank you. And you, the Knack for Business listeners, really appreciate your time today. So Naomi's seen lots of people struggle to get noticed, and she can put you on the right path. Find the good podcast host to connect with, and get your message out there. Tell your story because it's part of your overall marketing process. Because if people don't know you're there, they won't be able to find you, right? It's you can't see you, can't hear you, you don't exist, and that's her job to turn you into a visible entity and credible entity too.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motive8u.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter u.ca, or his website, motive8u.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from At Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner, and Wayne Pratt from Motive8U Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer. Please note that the Knack4 Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.